If you've been keeping up, I think you guys would be happy to know that the power has finally come back. And then it went out again, but then it came back, and we're ready to proceed with our regularly scheduled program. So on top of also having all these orders for these sets, I have finished making the brown sets. I have to finish just a couple more, but I also have custom orders. So I have to make an elopement dress, which is basically a wedding dress, a prom dress, 2 dance costumes. It's the same costume but 2 of them. And I also have to make 2 things for Leonelli's, like one of my consistent customers, but that she doesn't need that really immediately. So I'm gonna do that after I move. But everything else I'm trying to make before I move in 2 weeks. I don't know if I'm gonna actually get that done, but I'm gonna try. I definitely have to do the prom dress before I leave because she needs that. Her prom is May 14th. But this prom dress I need to do ASAP. She actually placed it with me 2 weeks ago. She reached out, and typically I like to get like at least 2 months or a month and a half in advance for custom orders. But she told me that she couldn't find anything in her size, and she really wanted like a white cowl or like ivory cowl neck dress. She's a size 3X, and so I was like, you know what, like I can make time for it. I really don't have that much, and it's like a simple dress, so I know that I can whip it out in like 2 days, I'm hoping for. So I have received the fabric. I actually got the fabric in from Colombo Silk. Shout out to Transformations by Tracy for putting us all on, because I know Natalia also bought this color card. But this is a company based out of New York, and they have like an in-store that you can go in, but you can buy their color card from them, and you have to do everything with them through email. Like you can't just go onto their website and buy stuff. You have to contact them through email. And so I reached out and I was like, oh, I would like a color card and fabric swatches. So the fabric swatches I got are silk CDC, silk organza, stretch charmeuse, double georgette, silk stretch charmeuse, I don't know if I said that, or in regular charmeuse, and then a silk crepe back satin. And then the color card offers so many options, and you can also customize a color. But they reuse their water for like their dyeing process, which we love. So I like that they take a little bit more of like a sustainable approach towards it, because you can't always find like silks very easily. Like I buy dead stock from my Miami supplier, but you know, he doesn't have every color available. He just gets like select colors from, you know, brands and stuff that are like not using them. So it's nice if I ever need like a certain color, like now. So this color card was $50, and then plus shipping. But the thing is that when you buy your first 5 yards of fabric, that $50 gets put into your first purchase. So this ends up being free after you buy your first 5 yards, and you always have to buy 5 yards with them. That's their minimum quantity. You can buy more, but you can't buy any less than 5 yards. And it costs about $22.50 a yard. Besides, their crepe back satin is like $44, which I wanted crepe back satin for this order, so I didn't have to put a lining. But it was too expensive for the budget of this dress, so I just went with a regular silk charmeuse, and I got it in an ivory color. And I've never received fabric like in a roll like this, because my supplier, like, or everywhere I get it, they just send it to me folded. So they sent it to me in a nice little roll, which is nice. And the quality is just so nice. But before I cut anything out, I need to make the pattern, and I need to pre-wash the fabric. It's extremely important to pre-wash natural fibers, especially silk and linen, because they tend to shrink. Linen especially always shrinks. So you want to wash it in cold water with like a natural or like a very gentle soap. And then same thing with silk. I always hand wash them and I air dry them. I don't put them in the washer and the dryer. The dress design is pretty simple. It's just like a cow neck dress, and then it has an open back with a cow neck, or like a cow draped back. And then it's gonna have straps that'll like cross in the back. Very simple, and I'm actually going to be using this cow neck dress pattern that I got from Etsy. I'll link it down below. Forever ago, and I got it whenever I was like not exactly sure how to pattern out cow neck dresses. This is a 3X, and I can't drape it on the dress form because my dress form is very small, and I don't want to get anything wrong since I need it quickly. And yeah, I just trust this pattern and I don't want to do it from scratch. There ain't nothing wrong with that. So I'm going to be using this pattern, and it actually goes down to like mid calf or below the knee. Okay, yeah, it's like to calf length, but she wants a floor length, and she's 5.5. She's 5'5", but she's wearing 5.5-inch heels. So she's gonna be stunting up in that prom, y'all. But so the length needs to be 42 inches from the waist down. And since this is going to be cut on the bias, typically the fabric is a 45-inch width, not a 60-inch width, is typically how silks are made, like that width. So whenever you're cutting on the bias, it doesn't give you enough length. So typically you have to add like an extra panel at the bottom, like at the diagonal, so that the straight grain lines meet, and it adds length to the bottom. Kind of confusing. So I'm going to trace out this pattern onto a new piece of paper so that I can make it to her actual size, and kind of just use this as like a basic block and then adjust the things that I need to adjust. Oops. Since I don't have enough paper, I'm just going to tape extra on the sides of the pattern that I already have. Because yeah, that's what I'm gonna have to do. I don't have enough paper to like retrace this out. So for the bottom part, I'm going to like cut it off by the knee so that the highest point starts at the knee and then it just goes down. Wait, now that I am thinking about it, I just realized, I thought about it, like this is the center front, so this is on the fold. So if I were to put the fabric on the fold here and cut on this line here, there would be a peak on the center of the dress. It wouldn't go directly across one diagonal line right across the entire front. There would be like a peak coming down. And we don't want that. So this is why I like to stare at my patterns for a long time and really think, because that is not what we want. So I need to rethink this to make sure it goes all the way across the front and the back. Okay. I'm going to have to make a full pattern, not just a half, because the diagonal, one side would be longer than the other, and if I were to cut it on half, like you could do it, but I probably shouldn't do it. So I'm just gonna tape a bunch of paper together and make a full pattern, and I still have to do the back patterns. So I'm just gonna tape a bunch of paper together, and it's gonna be a ratchet pattern. Good morning, everyone. It's more like good afternoon, but hello. We're back, and we're gonna continue working on this dress. So I left off, I kept working. I ended up making the entire front panel whole, like not just on a half. So it's whole so that I could cut the diagonal hem to attach the rest of the skirt. And so I decided to do the cut not fully on the grain line because it would be way too diagonal and I just felt like it didn't look good. Because like this is the straight grain line and you see how like diagonal that cut is. It didn't look good in my opinion, so I just made it a little bit more like less dramatic. And then I'm going to cut. So this is the top and this is the bottom. Hold up. This is the bottom that will be attached. And I'm going to cut this edge on the straight grain. Basically, I finished the front pattern. I just have to do the back now. And I'm basically going to do the back from this front since it's basically the exact same thing besides there's a cowl right above the waist. So that, and I don't want it to like surpass her waist that like her butt crack shows or anything. So I'm going to basically use this same pattern, but I'm going to just adjust it, like fold this pattern to make sure that it lines up. Silk is very delicate and can be very difficult to work with because it slips around a lot, especially when you're cutting it out. So a great tip to do whenever you're working with lightweight fabrics like silk, chiffon, or even any poly satins or anything is to lay out paper like on your table, on your ground, and put the fabric on top of it while you're cutting it out so it doesn't slide around. You want to lay the right side of your fabric on the paper. I'm going to place this pattern on the bias. So this grain line, I'm going to put it diagonal, parallel to the straight grain, so the pattern is all like crooked, but it's on the grain line and it's on bias. I decided to use some couture techniques. Instead of using chalk to draw around my pattern, I did a base stitch with a needle and thread instead. This keeps the fabric from stretching because whenever you cut fabric or pieces on the bias, the fabric tends to stretch, and so one side of your side seam could end up being a little longer than the other or stretched out in any way, and then whenever you go to sew you realize that your seams are puckering and your garments are uneven. So this base stitch keeps the fabric from stretching in any way and keeping it in place. It is a lot more time consuming and it takes forever, to be honest. I realized that it really helps later on because my garments look 10 times better and it prevents me from seam ripping a million times. When sewing silk, you want to use very sharp ballpoint needles or the smallest needle size, which is 75, to sew to prevent any snagging. I also decided to use a walking foot. I recently invested into this, and this basically just helps your fabric feed through your machine a lot easier. I've run into many problems where my machine will eat my fabric and get shoved into the hole like where the needle goes through, and then it'll ruin my fabric. But if you don't have a walking foot, a great other tip is to put tissue paper underneath your fabric while you're sewing, and this will also prevent the fabric from going into that hole and help it guide it through the feed dogs a lot easier. And then after you sew, you can just rip off the tissue paper very easily. Alright, so the other night I ended up sewing a bunch of things. So I sewed the two bottom panels together. I hemmed the top hem for the lining, for both linings front and back, and the hem for both the linings bottom. And yeah, I just hemmed a bunch of things so that I can start piecing the things together. And I've just been sitting here trying to figure out how to do this because I want everything to obviously look really seamless and like take the correct steps so it all looks seamless and like constructed very well. So typically you like would put the lining pieces together like on the side, sew them together, and the outer shell pieces on the side, and then you would like put the lining inside and then connect them inside out so that when you flip it, you know, everything is nice and neat. But since this is like there's no back, or like it's open back at the top, there's nowhere to connect the front lining piece to the back at the top. So I'm trying to figure out a different way to do it where it still looks neat. So I think I'm going to actually cut off this little piece that I ended up, or like from the original dress design, and just have it like a straight line from here to like where it would meet on the waist, so that it just like has like a nice seam. And then I would put a loop here so that like the straps go like this and they cross in the back, and like loop here and tie in the back, because I think that'll just look better than like this random little like peak that would just like, yeah, I think this would look more like nicer. I'm going to take this to the machine now and sew this top part right sides together so that it looks nice and neat on the outside, and then connect the back piece. Before, when I had made a bias dress, I would connect the lining to the top of, or like the inside flap of the cowl, but I realized that whenever you do a straight stitch across, it kind of restricts the fabric from like actually doing the cowl, because it gets too tight because it's obviously on the bias, so it like wants to stretch but it can't, and then the cowl just looks off. So I instead decided to tuck in the lining underneath so that everything falls nicely, but like you can't see the lining top edge, and like there's more movement. And mostly like I wouldn't put a lining, but the thing is that this is like a very see-through fabric. Obviously like any white or ivory is always very see-through, and that's why I wanted to do like a crepe back satin, but it was really expensive, so I just opted for this and put a lining. For the straps, I used the ivory satin cording that I already had, and I cut a 1.5 inch piece to use for the loop that will be attached to the back of the dress. And so I folded it in half and sandwiched it in between the two fabrics so that whenever the piece was turned back to the right side, it would be nicely tucked into the fabric and there would be no raw edges. I also did a couple stitches on top to really secure it in place. I repeated the same thing for the straps that will go over her shoulders and around the back. For both side seams, I did French seams. If you don't know what a French seam is, I have a YouTube's short on how to do a French seam. But basically you sew the wrong sides of the fabric together and then you trim off the excess seam allowance, iron the seam to one side, and then flip the fabric back inside out and iron it again, and then do a top stitch to encase all of your raw edges. For the hem of the dress, I created a rolled hem, and the best way to do this if you don't have a rolled hem foot is to sew a regular straight stitch on the very edge of your fabric and then iron down all the way around where that seam is, and then you go back to your machine and you fold over the fabric again as small as possible and do another top stitch. This is a great technique for chiffon fabrics. And this is the final look. It's really hard to show the dress because she's a size 3X and my mannequin is very small, so the proportions aren't correct, but so you guys get an idea. I'm really happy with how this dress came out. I sent her photos and she loved it. She said it was exactly what she wanted. So I'm really happy that I was able to create this for her, and I feel like I constructed it pretty well. I hope that you guys learned a little something something from this video and you're feeling more confident to work with silks or lightweight fabrics. I know it can be really annoying and they can really frustrate you, but practice makes perfect, literally. Thank you guys for watching, and make sure to subscribe because the next videos we're going to be making a wedding dress, an elopement dress, really, dance costumes. I got asked to make another prom dress and I am moving, so lots of content to come. I love you all, and as always, peace and love. Bye.